Greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm very excited to be joined today by Barbara Veeder. She's a workplace advocate for workplace culture, leadership, and development. She's also an expert in mental health services, global mental health support, and workplace wellness. We're so excited also to have Barbara deliver our complimentary training on managing psychosocial risks in the workplace, June 11th, 2024, from 9:30 to 11 a.m. Eastern. You'll be able to access that registration via the link on this page in the show notes. I'm Melissa Hughes, and I'm the Director of Business Solutions for Canada, and really excited to be here today and be joined by Barbara, who I've known for a very long time, and we have similar experiences. So, Barb, thanks for coming.
So pleased to be here. Thank you. I'm excited about this topic, and I'm excited to open up the discussion about the importance of psychosocial well-being.
Absolutely. I'm finding lately that there's so much focus on mental health and wellness in the workplace. What else would you say are considerations around maybe core competencies or other things to consider within the workplace?
Great question. So I think, of course, we've been seeing around, particularly through the COVID time period, the call for help around mental strain, and particularly in the workplace, we've seen a rising rate of short-term disability. So, when we look at these numbers, we say, how can we help? Let's add more quality service. And certainly many workplaces have heard the call for help and tried to respond. But what also has to be considered is that the mental health strain and the mental health issues that are growing are not in isolation from workplace culture and the environment that we live in. As we are speaking today specifically about workplace mental health, it's important to talk about how the work culture impacts the individual employee's well-being. And those two things cannot be separated out. They coexist. So in order to sort of address individual well-being within the workplace context, the work also has to look at the stressors and the issues within the workplace to ensure everyone is safe and secure and can contribute and be themselves at work.
Mm-hmm. I'm also finding in my conversations that, psychological safety in the workplace is really now where, the hard hat and the first aid kits and the musculoskeletal risks were probably 20 years ago. I'm seeing and hearing a lot of workplaces talk about, incorporating psychological safety into their health and safety programs and around their education. Do you have any thoughts about that, or what are you hearing in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think the metaphor or the hard hat is a good one, and it's like leaving a ladder out in the work site and someone trips. Like that's a workplace injury. It probably is a violation of the work environment and the codes of standards to ensure safety. And so now psychological well-being and psychosocial well-being are now, it's becoming clearer and clearer that there are things that we can do in the workplace to ensure safety. There are guidelines and tools and resources that promote and prevent psychological harm. And if your workplace is not using these mechanisms or is not psychologically safety, there is some accountability. The accountability and the consequences are changing rapidly. And I think globally you can see this in different locations. The progression and the link between the individual's impact and the psychological injuries that happen at the workplace and the accountability. So it's a very dynamic time with lots of emerging change around the globe.
Yes, I think in Canada, we have the standards, but I'm not sure how broad and how deeply they have been implemented. I know there's similar standards globally. Do you have any parallels to the one that I know of in Canada globally?
Yeah, I won't quote legislation, but I will say that there are certainly in Central Europe and in Belgium in particular, there is a relationship that the workplace owns to prevent workplace injuries, and there's accountability through legislation. You see that in Australia, you see that in emerging in Japan, in the UK, and there is changing legislation both sort of in our workman's comp policies around each province in Canada, and then some legislations around, what is, the obligations of the workplace. What you see also, and I think in each jurisdiction or in each country, there's different laws. And I would say is global HR leaders becoming aware of your accountability by location is key. As you said, Melissa, in Canada, it's still voluntary, but you see new legislation and accountability. I think of in the workman's comp policies in Nova Scotia by September, there will be the relationship between a gradual onset stress as being contributing to a workplace disability claim and having to address that type of injury. I'd like to highlight just one key point, and that is, psychological safety is typically sat in most cultures, in most workplaces as sort of a mental health issue. It is rising and changing in dimension and moving more clearly into risk management requirements because of the connection between psychological safety and psychological injury and that accountability.
Good point. I know I was at a safety conference a couple of months ago and was joined by the audience was really health and safety, occupational health and safety, risk management, not my typical team that I would normally consult with. And the entire agenda was around a psychologically safe workplace. I was really impressed and really surprised to see how engaged everyone was in that agenda and in the speakers. So I think absolutely what you're saying is of importance. The other thing that, you touched upon that I think is important is when we talk about traveling employees, that there's potential risk there as well around the culture that they're in, what's happening to them physically. Certainly as women in many places, there's risk, and it's pretty important to be taking into account the different cultural norms as well as the psychosocial risk and the psychological risk where they're traveling to from where they came from, for lack of a better way to describe it.
No, an excellent point. And I think as leaders in global industry or thought leaders in HR, I think, of course, recognizing diversity is an issue, cultural sensitivity and nuances as you go through and determine how do we make our organization psychologically safe? How do we ensure that people have the ability to learn safely, to contribute, to challenge safely, and to feel included, to be their best selves at work within the context of the work culture, within the context of their own diverse background and experience, and how to seek support if they feel that something needs to be addressed in a safe and respectful manner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think too, the other thing is, when we're talking about health and safety and risk management, we all know, if there's a fire in the building. We know if there's water spilled on the floor. We know when there's a ladder out of place, for instance, but how do we know how to recognize psychological safety, or how to begin that purview? Because I imagine for teams who are responsible for that on their scorecard and trying to put it into place and begin that process, it probably seems like a quite a large project. And I think you said to me a couple of weeks ago, you were talking about almost like micro surveys, or you use a really great term. Can you speak to that?
I think I was referring to pulse surveys, and I think it links back to the sort of the weight of trying to figure out how to navigate and how to determine where your baseline, or where you start as an organization around, are you psychologically safe? I always say, when I'm consulting, the best place to start is with your leadership and a leadership commitment. And the leadership in an organization sets the tone and the priority and ensures that if psychological safety is paramount, that it is at the top of the agenda and is being measured and managed. Metrics are so important to evaluate how you are, where you're trying to go to, and how far you've achieved. So you asked, I think the starting point is always evaluating the programs you have and the data that already exists, and to really look at how meaningful are your measures today. And then, and that means like an audit of all your mental health programs, all the places where people may be going to say, hey, things are not well. How many people are on STD? What are how many of them are, related to mental health? Dig into those claims, make sure you understand your data. And then I think, doing an assessment is also taking a pulse of those employees that are currently within your organization. And there are very comprehensive tools, and, there are some more targeted tools. Whatever starting gate you are at with the tool, and, to just take that pulse once a year or every 2 years, I would say doesn't really give you an indication of whether, if you're making change. If you have a baseline survey, you create measures, and then you implement programs to address some of the things that came out in your feedback. If you wait 2 years to do the survey to check in how you're doing, I will tell you through, natural sort of attrition and changes in your organization and you've lost pace of what's really happened. So that's where I say often to organizations, you can do a big survey, and then you can pick a couple of things and do regular pulse checks every 3 months, every 6 weeks, just to show that their feedback, the employees' feedback, is meaningful and it's actually helping you address change that you've committed to, and the input is helping to shape and tweak it along the way.
I love that. I'm such a nerd. I could talk about this all day long, but one of the things I think for organizations is they invest a significant amount of resources into their annual surveys. And so to really change that, and then to reframe the potential metrics that they're now going to be tracking against when they've had something in place that they've really solidified over a period of time, it can be scary and maybe something that's slow to consider. But when you're talking about a pulse check in the parameters that you just spoke about, it, you're able to really do something very quick, just a few questions that you're regularly analyzing or surveying your staff, and that you can track really simply metrics around improvements or that have been made, improvements in the health of your human resources, and improvement in or lack of improvement around absences, or even just, feeling able to become your authentic self and be authentic in the workplace.
When organizations think about where to start, and we've talked about the importance to evaluate your data, look at your programs, perhaps do some surveys to assess or some pulse checks. Another key investment is training, and meaningful training that allows, and I say this for leaders in particular because they are really at the front of modeling the organizational cultural values. So training that allows people to learn a new skill that may not be intuitive, like having a difficult conversation, not always an easy thing to do, to practice that skill, get feedback, and refine it. So learn, test, feedback, refinement, that sort of combination of training and coaching to modify and adapt is key. Because often training is one and done tick box.
Yes.
You did a training on bullying. I did the quiz and I got a 10 out of 10. That just says that you watched a couple videos and you learned quickly. It doesn't confirm that you know what bullying behavior looks like when you're conducting a meeting. And that when you see someone behaving in a way that you think is disrespectful and concerning, that you know with comfort how to address it. That is going to make a big difference in your culture.
That's a great point. And the workplaces have changed so much since I entered it. And it's really important to be educating on those signs and on the subtle or the not so subtle behaviors that are happening in the workplace that are actually symptoms or, calls of actual bullying.
Yeah, I think we've been through such a challenging time over the last couple of years adapting, to more virtual workplaces, and then for some of us returning to workplaces. And, as a leader, and I'm gearing a lot to leaders, but I say supervisors, managers, peers as well, really being in, having a safe and comfortable place to say, I could have done that better. I wish I could practice more. Oh, I find it so difficult to address a performance issue or something that, I think an employee needs to work on. Those are like important skills to really develop in a culture that you're trying to make psychologically safe.
Yes. Yes. And I've been reading a number of studies and it continues to come up that, people are still recovering from what we went through with COVID, and that there's a significant amount of burnout. Yes, but also levels of loneliness. So, some of those behaviors, I think, or those incidents, an impact on your life, along with the changes that we went through with COVID in the workplace and in cultures, I think is affecting the way that people are coming to the workplace, how they're able to engage. Maybe there's lack of engagement or there's less engagement. And so I think even as a peer, when you're seeing someone that seems different, it's sort of less common now to be able to see them in the kitchen or at the water cooler and say, hey, how's it going? Or, it's nice to see you. We haven't been in the office on the same day the last couple of weeks. How are things going? It's a little bit less common, I think. People seem to me anyways to be more sort of in their shell. But I think that that's something that is just a baseline that we all can do for our peers and for our colleagues, manager, supervisor, or otherwise.
Yeah, excellent point. And the key there is to really reach in and make sure people are okay, because that's also part of reassuring people in a psychologically safe environment that you care who they are, that you're willing to slow down and check in on how they are doing. Feeling connected and having a sense of purpose are really key to workplace success.
Yeah. And time goes by so quickly. So I might think about calling you, and then 3 days go by and I've forgotten. And then it's easy enough to just send a quick Teams, Zoom, or text message and say, hi, was just thinking about you. Hope everything's going well. It seems less natural than it did just a few years ago to do that, because we're all sort of up and down, in and out of the office, and have so many things going on, I think. Barb, what's your thought around sort of longer term programs? Do you think that, given your experience within workplace health, workplace mental health, do you think that implementing longer term programs is one of the things that should be considered? Or next question is, training leaders on how to recognize signs and symptoms and, what their actions are within the workplace. Maybe that's a two-part stacked question.
So I'll deal with the first question, which is, should we have more comprehensive mental health services available in the workplace? Absolutely. I think that if people come forward and they need more support, then we should provide that service. We know the benefits of providing EAP services, and I think having more comprehensive mental health services on the menu are really key. I will say that, CBT is incredibly valuable. CBT offered virtually is incredibly valuable, but what you're seeing is the need for people to tell their story and to feel some relationship in their healing to the trauma they may have been impacted by. And I think you're seeing trauma-informed counseling coming into the forefront as an important clinical practice, and helping people address some of the mental health issues they feel. So, that's a big topic, and I think for another day, Melissa, but certainly having a larger continuum and evaluating. When I say evaluate your mental health programs, look at for the overlap. Is everything is just, self-directed digital ICBT programs? Is it comprehensive enough? And is there something that can support people from remaining in work and addressing their mental health and building back their resilience? I mean, resilience and resilient support is key in the sustaining a healthy workplace. So that would be my part one. My part one is make sure your mental health programs are all very, have a full range of support on sort of different ways people learn and different ways people access services, and a number of different clinical interventions. You asked about training and the importance of training. And I think there are, as I said earlier, training and learning and implementing and reinforcing training are key. And there's like critical topics, safety topics, the psychological safety topics are critical, just like the physical safety requirements are critical. And creating some predictability and accountability and around making sure your workforce is trained regularly on the psychological safety requirements in your workplace.
Yeah. Great point. Yeah, I think it's about having access for all demographics and for all learning styles and learning needs. It's not necessarily one and done. I think, we saw a big shift towards digital support with COVID, which makes sense. People weren't able to go in person. But as time wore on, I almost feel like things are coming back full circle to, the early mid 90s, where, it's about access and less so around fulsome support as the only avenue from a digital perspective. People are wanting to talk to people again. They're wanting to see them. They're wanting to go in person to sessions. They find that that's a better solution for them. But then there's still those who want to, do access digitally, request support digitally. And I think having all of those opportunities for each individual member is what's key.
Yeah. Excellent. I agree.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you think we should consider or talk about today?
I think it's important just to leave with 2 key points. One is to remind ourselves that we are all individuals and that is our sort of, as individuals, we all contribute to the workplace culture and we all can influence the workplace culture. Mm-hmm. Policies, procedures, practices support also a healthy workplace, but really recognizing our individual accountability and the workplace accountability and how they intersect and come together, hopefully to create a really positive work culture. I think the other point I would say is, as I said already, when you are measuring something, it's because it's important. When you elevate something to your leadership level, your executive level, it's because it's key to the organization's success. And I think psychological safety should be at the top of the agenda because it ensures the safety of all employees and ensures a positive and productive workplace culture.
Excellent. I agree. Thank you so much. Again, we were joined today by Barbara Veeder, who's an MSW and has a significant amount of expertise in workplace culture and global mental health and wellness. And again, please do feel free to register for our complimentary Managing Psychosocial Risks in the Workplace on June 11th, 2024. And we look forward to seeing you then. Bye, Barb.
Thank you.